Rambam over here is speaking about really not as a codifier of halacha, even though it is halacha, but rather as a doctor, as a dietitian. Many of these things are based on the Gemara, and many things are based on his knowledge as a doctor. And he had said that when one eats food, you should always first eat what's more easily digested, because once the digestive process begins, the more difficult food to digest is easy to digest because it already began with putting less stress on the digestive system. So he gave examples. If one wants to eat during the same meal chicken or fowl and meat, you should first eat the meat, the fowl, and then the meat, because it's easy. Or fish and meat, or chicken, first eat the fish, because fish is easy to digest than even chicken. Then he says, what about eggs and chicken? Although the egg comes from the chicken, it's easy to digest eggs, and then you should eat the chicken. Okay? Then he speaks about lamb versus beef. Lamb is easier to digest than beef. You should eat first the lamb and then the beef, so on and so forth. And he says the general principle is whatever is more easily digestible, eat that first, and then eat something which is more difficult afterwards. Now we're holding number 8. The mosa chama. In the summertime, when the body is taxed due to the heat, ocha by cholam akar, we should eat cold food. The cold food cools down the system. Lo yarbe betvolim. It should not be too spicy, because spices also heat up the body. Vochel esachometz. But you have vinegar. Vinegar is okay. Most like shomim in the wintertime, ochel my cholam chamin. You eat hot food, because that warms the body. Umarbim betavolim. And the food should be more spicy, because spices activate certain things in the body which keep the body warm. You shouldn't eat too much mustard. Mustard seed is not good. Chiltis is also a very sharp spice. The Gemara tells the in Chulin that chiltis, it's such a sharp. We speak about jalapeno peppers. Moroccans eat very spicy food. My son's father, who's originally was born in Morocco, came to the United States when he was a young boy. He was 12, 13 years old. Because he ate such spicy foods from the time he was a child, he lost the taste of his taste buds. His taste buds were dulled because they eat such spicy foods. So he was able to eat very spicy things because his taste buds they were actually impaired. Chiltis is such a spice, the Gemara says, that if an animal ingests this spice, it actually perforates its stomach, and the animal becomes a treifa, becomes rendered not kosher. Because an animal that has a perforated stomach, that's how sharp this chiltis is. So the Rambam says you should only eat a small amount of mustard seed, chiltis. And this is the way you conduct yourself. You live in cold regions of the world. If you live in warmer regions, each region based on the climate, that's how you should conduct yourself. Eating lighter food, cold food, hot food, spicy, less spicy. Then he speaks about foods which are literally detrimental to your health. The Rambam is using certain adjectives here. The bad to a great degree, ad ma'od. The Rambam saying every word the Rambam writes is calculated, evaluated. It's bad, very bad, to a great degree. Extremely bad for your health. You should stay away. You should never eat any of these kinds of food. That's how bad they are. Never eat them. Kigon, for example. Hadogim hagdolim hamluchim hayushonim. Large fish which are salted and they're old fish. Old fish which is salted away is detrimental, unhealthy to the nth degree. Hagvina hamalucha yishana, aged cheese, which is salty. Most kosher cheeses are not that. You go by these cheese shops in Little Italy. Sometimes you have to hold your breath. You have to cover your nose and your mouth. That's how bad it smells. So old cheese, which is salted. Now they say something interesting. Hakmeim apitrios, mushrooms and pitrios are something similar like mushrooms, spores. Vabosa hamaliach hayoshin. This we're talking about beef jerky. In the old days, they had to salt meat, otherwise the meat would rot. So it was salted meat to the degree that it's preserved. V'yayin hayoshan, v'yayin migito. Freshly squeezed grape juice, before it ferments. The fermentation process in grapes, there was recently, I was reading, within a year or two, if you eat an orange or grapefruit, although the juice is part of the flesh of the fruit, the juice is healthy. When you extract the juice from the orange or the grapefruit, it doesn't have the same health factor. Not the same. It's barely has any value to the body. When you eat it together with the flesh of the fruit, the meat of the fruit, then it's healthy. Then even the juice is healthy. You extract it, it doesn't have it, almost has no value. It's interesting. Yain ligito, freshly squeezed grapes before it ferments. The fermentation process, which the alcoholic component of wine is very valuable, but if it's freshly squeezed grapes, not. And he says it's not healthy. The tavshil shesho acher nodafrecho. You had food that was left out or left for a while, and because it's right before it starts deteriorating, spoiling, it loses its taste. Doesn't have it's the intense taste anymore, because that's an indication of spoilage. It's spoiling. Any food which has a bad smell, which indicates it's becoming putrid, omar biose, or something which is very bitter, or elu laguf k'mosama mobis. Ingesting these kinds of foods is like taking poison, literally poison. He says there are other foods which are not healthy, but not to the extent of the first foods which you listed. Therefore, if you engage and partake of those foods which are not healthy, you should only eat a small amount of them, and only every once in a while. You shouldn't eat them too often. Even if eating small amounts too often is not good. Only after an extended period of time. And you shouldn't allow it to be part of your diet because it becomes habitual. Or to eat it, always eat it, even if you eat it with another food item. Large fish. You think a large fish, it makes the difference. Large or small. Milk, which was cheese that was made from milk, that was milked after 24 hours. It wasn't from fresh milk. There's always this before pasteurization. So you have bacteria. So therefore, if the cheese is made from milk that was left out after 24 hours, it's not healthy. Ubosa shorim gidolim, the flesh of large oxen also. The Gemara talks about ox meat is so tough. The Gemara says in Shabbos, according to one opinion, that even if you put into a kli rishon, it doesn't cook so quick. That's how tough that ox meat is. Utyoshim gidol, large sheep also. Vapul vadashim, beans and lentils. Vasphere, I'm not sure what sphere is. Lechem seorim, barley bread, is not healthy. Barley is really animal fodder. V'lechem matzos, to eat bread which is matzah, which there's no fermentation in that. Something not healthy. V'akruv cabbage, vachotzir, habitzolim. Not sure what chotzir is, but onions, shumim, vachardel, vatznon. Onions, garlic, mustard seed, and radishes. Kol helu roim heim. It's not healthy. A roy lodem lechol be'elu elo ma'at ad ma'od. Hear this? You should eat ma'at, a small amount, to a great degree, not just a small amount, very small amount, only in the winter. Because evidently, since it's more difficult to digest these, so therefore, taxing the system to a degree in the winter is okay, because it's cold. In the summer, where the temperature, climate taxes the person, and the body has great difficulty processing it, stay away from it altogether. On no circumstance. But he says, but beans and lentils, it's not worthwhile eating them. Could be, when we speak about lentils, could be there's a difference to eat them raw or eat them cooked. Sometimes, like I said before, cabbage. One time people ate cooked cabbage. There's raw cabbage and there's cooked cabbage. I'm not sure. He's not differentiating what it's cooked. Could be he's only speaking in the raw state. But if it's cooked, maybe it is something which is healthy. Hadluim ochlin mehen bimos achamot. Dluin is gourds, like zucchini, that you eat in the summertime. There's other food items that are not healthy, but not as unhealthy as what the things we've discussed until now. I'm not sure what kind of species this is. It's called a waterfowl. Maybe a duck. A duck is waterfowl. Ubinayona, kitanim, small doves. Hatamorim, dates, belechem kolui, b'shemen. You roast, people used to saturate bread in oil and roast it in the fire or toast it. Oh, lechem shenilosh b'shemen. Rather than kneading the flour with water, you knead it with oil. Basole shenapo also kol tzorcha achol nishra ben rech musan. Fine flour, fine white flour is unhealthy. With the bran was taken out totally from it. This is what we call refined flour. Not healthy. Same thing, there's white rice, there's brown rice. It's been bleached. Everything, all nutrients are taken out of it. Fine flour, that means all the bran has been taken out of it. Batzir v'marayis, fish brine, or fish oil, Roy laharbos mechol seilu. You shouldn't eat too much of it. V'adam shu chocham, person who's wise. Not too many wise people. He may have smart people, not wise. Right? We always differentiate between smart and wise. A person who's smart, you could say he's a smart aleck. It used to be the term. A wise person is not a wise aleck. Wise means you have wisdom. So he says a person who's smart, the kovish yisitro, and you're able to control your inclination, you can rein in on yourself. V'lo yimoshech achat taivoso, and you shouldn't succumb to your desires. Lo yacham in his current klum. Best not to eat things that we spoke about, even if it's slightly not healthy. Elo im nitzterach l'refuah, unless you have to do it for medical reasons. For medicinal, they have certain medicinal values. Harei gibor. That person is a gibor. Ezo gibor hakovish yisitro. Who is the strong person? The one who's able to control his behavior. You what? You suppress your inclination. You take control of your life. It's a story I told about Rebbe Kamenetsky. Sechet Tzaddik Levrocha. He was one of the leading Torah sages. And there was a time in his life he was overweight. So he went to the doctor, and the doctor says you have to take off 20 pounds for your health. Comes back 6 weeks and says, "Well, I'll see you in 6 weeks." Comes back 6 weeks. The doctor says to him, "You don't look well. You look haggard." Your frock is hanging on you. The shirt is large. What happened? He says, you told me to take off 20 pounds. I took off the 20 pounds. The doctor says, that is the law. You must maintain your health. So I followed your instruction exactly. He says, you know something? I thought you were well, because most people, when I tell them that, they don't listen. Because they're always, cheating. They're always succumbing to their appetite. I mean, how many people have that level of control? I want to record this. Okay. He's saying, Olam yimna odom atzmo be persilon. You should always deny yourself. You should stay away from eating fruit of trees. Lo yarbe behen, and you shouldn't eat too much of them. Afilu evasion, even dried fruit. But definitely, if they're moist, avokodim she's bashul kol tzorchan. But to eat them in an unripened state, it's not fully ripe. It's like swords to the stomach, to the body. Carob is detrimental, never healthy. Whether it's dry, ripe. We talk about pickled fruit, fruits that are pickled. And if you eat them, it's only a small amount in the warm regions. What about figs, grapes, and almonds? That's healthy. Grapes are healthy, figs are healthy, and almonds are healthy. Whether they're moist, whether they're dry. Eat as much as you want. But you shouldn't be continuously engaged in it. Even though they're the best of all fruit of the tree, but too much is no good. It's interesting. We speak about Eretz is called Eretz Zovas. It's the land that flows with milk and honey. What's the honey? We're not talking about bees honey. So the Chazal tell us that on the palm trees, the dates were so saturated with nectar, it would literally it would drip from the palm tree. And the goats, their udders were so filled with milk, the milk would drip out of. It didn't even have to be milk. There would be this dripping. So you'd have the nectar dripping from the palm trees, and you have the milk dripping from the udders of the goats and the sheep. So when they would intermingle on the ground, they had like a river that flowed with milk and honey. And here we're talking about, we say dates is not something you should eat. But yet, we speak about the praiseworthiness of the land. It's a land that flows with milk and honey. So evidently, it's something positive, not something negative, unless you say there's a difference between the nectar, date nectar, and the date itself. Gemara tells a story that Ula, who was a student of Rabbi Yochanan, who was from Eretz Yisrael, went to Iraq. He went to Bavel. In Bavel, at that time, they didn't have great Torah scholars. People were busy working. He goes to the market, and you're able to buy a whole basket of dates for $1. Hear this? So he says to himself, he says, if the standard of living is so cheap that you could buy a whole basket of dates for $1, it's unexcusable to not studying Torah. You don't have to work that much because you're able to cover your full budget with a pittance. Said before, okay, this is what was his takeaway. He buys the basket of dates and he eats the dates. That night he had intestinal problems. He couldn't sleep all night. He was writhing in pain. Next morning he says, these people in Iraq, in Bavel, that tzaddikim, the little bit they're able to learn, it's unbelievable. After eating that kind of date, they're able to learn and they're not sick. they're angels. So the other way. It's interesting. The soil, Iraq the earth is very moist. Very moist. The water table is very high. And because of that, the trees, when they bear fruit, they're very lush. They're lush in Iraq. However, the river, it's the river water. Because the water, we have the Finger Lakes, upstate New York and near Canada. Finger Lake region, you have all kinds of vineyards there. Why? Because again, the lakes there, the earth in that area absorbs, the water is absorbed into the earth. They're very high, it's highly saturated with water. But you realize that water, let's say that water has tannin in it. They have certain chemicals, natural chemicals. So if that tannin goes into the earth, and that's what hydrates the fruit, so those dates, sometimes when you ingest it, it's not that healthy. So unless you're really accustomed to eating that kind of fruit, you get sick. Okay. Lolam yishtadol shiv me'av rofin kol yomov. You should always try to make sure that your bowel is soft. You always have a soft bowel. Always. He says, or your whole life, yeah, korov l'shilshumat. It should even be slightly close to being loose. That's how important it is that the body should expel all the toxins. Yes. So they call godel b'refuah, and says that's a basic principle in medicine. Kozman sharei nimna. Oyotze bekoshi. Anytime the feces are actually withheld in the body, or one has difficulty expelling them, chlom roim boim. It's the cause of many diseases, much illness. Ubemeyu rafe odmeov in isamtsu mat. What does a person do to soften his bowel if they become actually impacted? If you're a young person, yochel baboker meluchim shlukim mituvolim b'shemen. Every morning you should have salty foods which are spicy, salty and spicy foods, and they're saturated in olive oil, shem zayis u'merayis, and fish brine, ubemelach lopas, without bread. Bread is a binder. So you're eating foods which are salty, cooked, and in oil and fish brine. O yishte me shelek shel tardin. You should eat borscht, beet juice, drinking cooked beet juice, o kruv, b'shemen zayis, or cabbage juice with olive oil, u'merayis u'melech, with fish brine and salt. That's for a young person. That will somehow soften the bowel. If you're an elderly person, evidently that's too hot on the system for an elderly person. Yishte dvash mozuk b'mayim chamin. You should drink warm, hot water diluted with honey. Beboker in the morning. V'yishek arba shos. And wait, after you drink that honey and hot water, you wait 4 hours. That somehow softens the system. So then you eat the meal, eat the morning meal. V'yasakein yom echad o shlosha o arba yomim. And you can continue this ritual 1 to 3 or 4 days. Im tzorech l'kach achirafumev. And you continue it until the bowel softens. But if you do this, and it's a known fact, people are advised, the first thing they do in the morning, they should drink a hot cup of water, hot water, especially a person who's a little bit older, because it's for this, it softens the bowel, and a person doesn't become constipated. Because he's saying here, constipation, all illness begins with constipation, where the body can't expel the toxins from the body. It's interesting. The bracha that the Ashkenaz Dolo had legislated after you do your bodily functions. If you look at the text of the bracha, that the body has to be able to expel its waste. If not, you would die. So thanking Hashem after you do your bodily functions, and he's referred to Rofei Chalbosa Mafnivasos. He's the healer of all flesh, and he does it in the most wondrous way. It's like miraculous, the way the body functions. That after it processes the food, it expels the non-essential, which has no value, and retains the nutrients and whatever has to be retained. The rest is expelled. Okay, I think we'll stop here. Unless